Hello, everyone. Sorry,
Welcome, sir. Welcome.
Am I on?
Yes. आपकी स्क्रीन मोनिका आपकी स्क्रीन ऑफ कर दो. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanji. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Monica, for that introduction. You practically said most of my talk. That was a fantastic introduction. But let me clarify a few things and then talk about happiness. Quantum science is a science of happiness, science of well-being. I was very enthused hearing the previous speaker, the Reiki master, and that was about also well-being. So in this conference, the idea of 5 bodies of the human being is nothing new. Of course, this comes from the Upanishad. And you all know about this. Actually, what I will speak about basically is confirming via quantum physics, the Upanishadic message, confirming via quantum science, what is in our yoga psychology, namely Bhagavad Gita and Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, refuting the one way that you all may still think of consciousness. In India, this is very popular, the way of looking at the world as illusion. Now, that is a very misleading way. Quantum physics is not supporting it. There's no need to support it anymore. That argument I will present to you. And mostly what I'll present is the new things that quantum science is revealing. Indeed, there are subtleties. When you get the scientific details of what the rishis discovered 7,000 years ago, perhaps, this was absolutely amazing, considering that they were deciphering their experiences. And I had glimpses of the experiences that they had. And indeed, it takes many years of practice to understand the message. And these rishis did all that. The message they gave, they constructed, was remarkably accurate, although became better and better over time. Some of it was clarified by Buddhism, the Buddhists. Some of it was clarified by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita and of course Patanjali in the Yoga Sutra. But the totality of what Vedanta yoga tradition teaches is remarkably accurate. The basic point that quantum science makes, however, is extremely important. So let's start with that. Quantum science says that material objects are objects of possibility. This chota particle that Monica was talking about, this chota is very, very little particles, like you can't imagine how small they are, 10 to the minus 15 meters. I mean, it's just very, very, very small. And even that is just a sort of a vague way of putting it. One way to picture them is really almost like points. So these objects are called elementary particles. And elementary particle nature of matter pervades also for energy. So quantum generally stands for elementary particle of energy. But these are...
Your voice is little low. Can you little bit manage that?
Oops. Can you hear me now better?
Yes, better.
Oh, okay. So what I was saying is that quantum, the word quantum describes elementary particles of matter and energy, okay? So the point, of course, of quantum physics that is revolutionary is that these objects are really not particles, although we think of them as particles still, but they are waves. And they're very peculiar waves. They are not waves that reside in space and time. They're waves of potentiality. This is the most important message of quantum physics that you have to grasp. What a wave of potentiality, wave of possibility is about. Basically, it's quite a simple concept. All it means is waves have the characteristic of spreading out many different places at the same time, whereas particles are always localized. When they move in a trajectory, one place at a time. Very different behavior. So, but this is imposed upon us by the mathematics of quantum physics, which has been verified by myriad experiments. It's foolish to challenge any of basics of quantum physics. So you have to live with that. And living with it has been very difficult for Western scientists because it requires some devolutionary concepts, revolutionary Western thinking. It is revolutionary also in today's Indian thinking, Eastern thinking, because we have bought into a philosophy of doing science, which is really a dogma. But somehow it has convinced most of our intelligentsia, including all the intelligentsia in India. I have spoken to people in some universities. They follow this absolutely with like, it is the final word. Amazing how prejudiced people can become in just a matter of 40 years. And the idea that is the dogma is that everything is matter. Of course, consciousness cannot be material, and the breakthrough came when I and a few others in quantum physics, we realized that the domain of potentiality, where these waves are, that domain is consciousness itself. It's the ground of all being. And that realization is a fantastic realization. It's the domain of potentiality, where objects are potentiality. So the first thing that you have to recognize is that this was impossible to be acknowledged by our great rishis. Why? Because the concept of potentiality just was not there. The other concept that was not there is that this is unconscious for us. This consciousness, the ground of being, is unconscious in us. Although this is somewhat recognized in the Buddhist concepts, and I may have time to go into that, but may not be, we'll see. But this is the new way of looking at that science has given us. Science has introduced, thanks to Freud, thanks to Carl Jung, the concept of the unconscious, where consciousness is, but there is no awareness. There is no subject-object awareness. The subject-object awareness is what we experience as consciousness. That has to be very clearly understood. Now, don't underestimate the mistake people make about consciousness. Materialists think that consciousness is an object. And frankly, I teach. And we have even founded a University of Transformational Education in collaboration with University of Technology in Jaipur, India. We are giving masters and PhD in quantum science of health, prosperity, and happiness. And I meet literally hundreds of students at this university at a very intimate level, and also at large in the world. Many, many countries I have visited, many, many people I have talked, and many of them are aspirants. But today, the biggest poverty of thinking is that people think about consciousness in a very materialist way, as an object. This is absolutely abominable, considering that even Indians, I was just talking to a fellow who was reporting to me about a book of a realized person. who, by his description, seemed like had a genuine samadhi experience. But this man, when presenting his experience, he says consciousness is a special kind of atom. Now, atom is sort of the precursor of the elementary particle concept. Objects indeed consist of molecules first and then broken down atom and then broken down elementary particles, and you cannot further break it down. This concept, this reduction concept, applies to objects, material, matter. This reduction concept does not even apply to objects of our other experience. It does not apply to thought, does not apply to feeling. You cannot break down a thought. You cannot break down a feeling. And of course, you cannot break down consciousness. Consciousness is not even an object. And so the first thing you have to comprehend is that you have to overcome the predominant misconception that this materialist science, we believe that everything is matter, is introducing in our culture and society all over the world. This thinking that the reductionistic concepts, atomistic concepts apply to everything. This is why you hear people will give very spiritual talk. They will claim that I connect with Vedanta and everything is explained. But then you look at the theory and the theory says, well, consciousness is unified field. The same unified field which gives us the unified field theory of matter. Now, you know, that's a good progress that materialists have made in terms of understanding material forces, but it has nothing to do with consciousness. Matter is just possibility for consciousness to choose from. This is where we begin. Now, it is true that this consciousness in its expansion is not available to ordinary people. It becomes an experience, once in a while experience. And this is the problem. But still, in spite of the fact that we experience consciousness in a very constricted way, we have enough of these expansions not to make that mistake. That consciousness is really atomistic. It really is just an object. Okay, so that's the first pitfall you must avoid. And in my own experience, take nothing for granted. You may have many, many misconceptions, and it is these misconceptions that prevent you from doing the practices because you don't understand why the practices work. If you start with misconceptions, you can never understand what the virtue of meditation is, what the virtue of yoga is. All these things require an expanded view of consciousness. So the first thing that quantum science advises you is to live in an expanded way. And so my talk will be how to live in an expanded consciousness. Really, that is the important thing. Remember, it's a potentiality. This expanded consciousness is a potentiality that is actualized when two people interact together in some local way. And that interaction, we have shown experimentally that if two people meditate together with the intention that they will be connected, they actualize that oneness between them. How can we experience that? You can experience that most easily by your capacity of loving someone. If you love someone, a parent, a child, you will notice that your consciousness has expanded. Just next time you notice. As soon as you notice the expansion, you will notice that there is a feeling associated with it. The feeling usually will be in the region of the heart. And there would also be thinking of caring. And then you ask the question, okay, so this thinking and these feelings do not come to me ordinarily. Why do I care for this person? Ordinarily, I don't. I care only for me. This is called me-centeredness. This is also called the ego. That's where that idea that I'm an object comes from, because I can look at my me, but we think me and I are the same. I have listened to many philosophers, even in India. They are all confused. Me and I are the same. Are they the same? No. Quantum science shows distinctly I is different. As Monica was introducing, I is a quantum self. This is the Upanishadic concept. They just gave it a different name. I is called Antaratman. Antara means inner self. How can we reach I from starting with the me? Quantum science reveals that the brain gives us not only the I consciousness, not only the me consciousness, the conditioned consciousness, but also in between there is a pre-conscious. In this pre-conscious, if we enter it, and that's what meditation does, you reveal more and more, you experience more and more of the quantum self. This is the key. Why does meditation work? Meditation eventually will take you to a relaxed consciousness. Relaxation is a symbology of, relaxation is an experience of expanded consciousness. Just realize that when you are in contracted consciousness, you have all this me-centeredness, anxiety, security problems, negative emotions. When we are expanded, all that disappears. So this is what happiness is about. Happiness is not about having molecules, certain molecules in the brain. Those molecular aspects of happiness is built into the brain through our evolution, through the pleasure circuits. Indeed, we need to eat. Indeed, we need to have sex. All this is well-known needs, okay? And those well-known needs are necessary because you want to survive. And because you want to survive, indeed, certain aspects develop that will motivate us towards satisfying those needs. So pleasure comes from eating food and having sex. That's pleasure. It's molecular. Indeed, neuroscientists find that there's plenty of dopamine, that's a molecule in the brain. And there's a lot of another molecule called oxytocin, a hormone, in the body. So they identify love with sex. But in truth, anyone who has the discipline of cuddling after sex knows that the pleasure that sex gives is followed by a different kind of very pleasant feeling and very pleasant thinking of caring about the other. And that is what we experience as love. It's an expansion of consciousness in which we intuit that, oh, this person that I'm holding, this person that I'm cuddling, I love this person. Love is an intuition. But we cannot intuit these objects. We call them archetypes. We cannot intuit them unless we have an expanded consciousness. So what happens ordinarily in our ordinary life, there are things which reminds us of this intuition. This is where the concept of collective unconscious comes in. Humankind were not disconnected as we are today. With this materialist science, we really have become enormously disconnected. We are not even as disconnected when we have a truce between science and religion. That was about 1980. Until then, there was that truce. Only for the last 40 years, The truth is broken, science has betrayed, and religion see this as an affront, and there is now a worldview polarization. As you know, in India, this is also very common. There's the Hindutva movement, and they don't care much about science, and there is some reason for it. I mean, science is materialistic. But that is not science, it's a pseudoscience. Science with a dogma is pseudoscience. Now, of course, once this kind of polarization happens, to get back to reality is very difficult. Just as religions, you know, Hindu religion is perhaps, many people have said, is a very liberal religion, accepts all religions in the world. But the Hindutva movement certainly is not Hindu religion in that unified spirit. It excludes. And anything that excludes is dogma. How could Hinduism become a dogma? These are the questions that we need to ask. And if you are into happiness and spirituality, give up those dogmas. Dogmas restrict consciousness, and then you cannot have this experience. But if you are not restricted by dogma, then if your consciousness is open, then what happens is that anytime you look at a flower, we get into this quantum self and can experience the archetype of beauty. Anytime we look at a loved one, we experience the archetype of love. Anytime we look at the world with Shiva, goodness in our heart, we experience wonderful feelings of brotherhood, sisterhood. So this is the way of consciousness, living in the expanded way. So today, with the help of quantum science, what we do is that we make a scale of happiness. Indeed, this is an important point that, okay, I am willing to accept the fact that happiness is expansion of consciousness. And then how far can we go? We have this contracted consciousness, ego. We have to accept that there is no escape from it. Why do we get into ego? This is a legitimate question. We get into ego because consciousness comes to us through the brain. Brain makes memory, and that's part of quantum science. You cannot have an experience without making memory. So we are caught. Once you have memory and you process memory, memory processing conditions you in favor of past responses. And this conditioned consciousness we call ego. It's worse than that because you also have looked at your ego, this ability that we have. We can look at our ego. We can look at past experiences. And that makes ego into an object more and more. Ego becomes me. And then we become very centered about this me. Everything, every relationship becomes transactional. What is the need for me? Even relationship with our intimate people. Today, people don't take care of their parents. People are even reluctant taking care of their children because they ask the question, what is the need for me? And they find these children not going to do anything for me. When I'm old, why should I take care of them? And vice versa. So this is the society and culture all over the world we are building. Husband and wife, divorces, why? Because primarily this question, what is the need for me? If you're not giving me something, why should I love you? We impose conditions like that. Every relationship, we make it so conditional that the relationship excludes this establishment of oneness. We can no longer interact to give us that potentiality and actuality. This potentiality is very, very important, this potentiality of oneness. Quantum physics has given it a name and proper understanding, and you need to know that. This is called non-locality. Our ordinary interactions are local. Means that we interact through exchanging signal, okay? That should be very clear. That's our ordinary interaction with anyone. And then when this expansion happens, then we find that we do not need signals anymore. In the Hindu tradition, the marriage vow says, Yodadi hridayam tava, tadadi hridayam mama. Wherever your heart is, my heart is there. That's the feeling. When you love, when you are holding your loved one in your arms, that's the feeling. Your heart and my heart have become one. That oneness is the basis of meditating on the heart. You get it so easily, non-locality. You become one signal-less communication. You no longer need signals to communicate. She and you, he and you are one. Now, how many of you feel that during the day? In India, we developed a culture where we don't, well, of course, now coronavirus has made everything difficult, but husbands and wives, they have to take that chance, even with the virus around. Why can't we hug? So hugging has to come back in our society. In the ancient Indian culture, there was no dearth of hugging. People hugged each other, especially people who are going to be intimate, they hugged each other. Hugging is a very good help for establishing non-locality. So you have to understand how to use these quantum principles in order to scale that ladder of happiness, increasing happiness. Scale starts with zero happiness. Psychotic people, very intellectual people become that also. Approximately psychotic. They're not totally hopeless, but the more you are disconnected from that ability of expansion of consciousness, the more psychotic you become. Okay, please understand that. Happiness is expanded, your ability of expanding consciousness. Why is the psychotic expansion no possible expansion and therefore zero level of happiness? Because the only way a psychotic can experience anything positive is through pleasure. And eventually they develop very distorted way of getting pleasure. And that's why we get these mass murderers and serial killers and all this. So how to avoid this, how to come out of this? So don't fall into this condition. Overuse of intellectuality. Overuse of intellectuality will keep in the mental dimension. You become logical. You don't need to use the expanded consciousness anymore because your belief becomes that everything is already available in the brain. You are nothing but a machine. The materialist view. So why is the materialist view popular world over? Because all these people that you revere, that teaches you, supposedly give you higher education, they're all of constricted consciousness. They're all intellectuals and just know the logic. They can be very good in logic. You tell them, well, they have high IQ intelligence, all logical and mechanical. No heart, no consciousness. It's as simple as that. How to change this society? We all have to take responsibility. You all have to understand how to do it and then do it. As I said, meditation will take you there because anytime you expand your consciousness, anytime you enter that pre-conscious, there is quantum self coming at you. It's you. Why shouldn't it? It's you. This is what the Upanishads were trying to tell us. Right? Everything is consciousness. I am that consciousness. Tat hamasi, you are also that consciousness. This is the realization of the Upanishads. Aham Brahmasmi and then Tat Brahmasi. Yes, I am that consciousness. Brahman translates as consciousness, Sat Chit Ananda. Chit, awareness, that subject-object split. Ananda means, Ananda came from the word infinite, unlimited, unbound. Anta means bound, unbound, ananta, no boundary. That's consciousness. Ananda is joy, that's the joy of expansion, expanded consciousness. More expanded we become, more joyful we become. By not having that capacity, as when we are intellectuals, we lose all that joy. No happiness. Only availability is pleasure, which is conditioned in the brain already, it's mechanical. Joy of food does not come from only food. Yes, certain foods are very tasty, but really joy of food comes in between your food intake. If you're eating with family, then much more joy. Why? Because you eat slow, your heart opens a bit, energy rises. In India, we say energy rises from the navel chakra, Manipura chakra, which is the chakra of the ego, to the heart, where non-locality is, where quantum self resides in a certain way of speaking. Not exactly scientifically correct, but in a certain way of speaking, it is true because heart is the easiest way to access this expanded consciousness. Okay. So neurotics are happiness level 1. Neurotic means that, okay, you were intellectual some of the time, but not all the time. Intellectual means eventually you're going to become neurotic. You're going to become fearful because you're always thinking that people are going to attack you. People are, your security becomes the issue. Not only you have what is in it for me, transactional attitude, but you also have this idea, everybody is against me. Everybody is going to hurt me. Me versus the world. Competition, domination. Look at what that has gotten us. All you have to do is to look at the countries which are in the hands of such people and realize that, oh my God, what our society has made. These dictators, what total into their head and have no idea of what happiness is about, what expanded consciousness is about. Neurotic people are running practically every country today. So this is level 1. They are level 1 because at least with therapy, neurosis can be healed. So they leave some opening. When the realization comes, okay, the state I live may not be the best state in the world. Maybe I can improve it. And then they seek out help, and then people can help them and heal them. Next level is what we call normal, level 2 of happiness. This is an okay state to be. However, your brain still is against you because it has that me-centeredness built into it. I cannot get into details because I don't have the time, but this is why we have the University of Transformation. Quantum activism, Vishalayam, we call it. We have many courses and certifications, single courses, of course, masters and PhD too. So if you want details, if you like any of this quantum science, how all of our ancient concepts are becoming scientific, we can give you the details. In this talk, I cannot go into too much detail because it's fair, not fair to other speakers to take more time than it's assigned to me. So let's see how far we can go. I have still 15 or so minutes left. Level 2 of happiness is normal state. Does not mean that we can still overcome the brain. Main problem now is the brain. What does the brain give you? Brain gives you a human condition. This is what I call the natural condition of human beings. We all are dealt with it, okay? There's not much we can do. That's not entirely true because some of us were born before. There is phenomenon of reincarnation that quantum science supports fully, by the way, more or less in the entirety of the Upanishadic model, which surprised me, the discoverer. So that's something that is enormously to be proud of our ancestors, that they figured it all out from whatever data they have and whatever experiences they have. So that helps a little bit, but still, even so, the brain is quite compulsory, and brain has this built-in me-centeredness. Brain has this built-in circuits of negativity. You all know negative emotions. I don't have to remind you: jealousy, competitiveness, domination, violence, anger. And then, of course, we also have the pleasure circuits. Pleasure circuits bring us some positivity, and they can also lead us to addiction because we have no other avenue for exploring the positive. So we take more and more of this pleasure thing. And we discovered that we really cannot have too much food without really becoming obese. And that's dangerous. Doesn't feel good anymore. And of course, sex, nature has not given us the, although in some traditions, religious traditions, the picture, heaven is the place where you can have sex indefinitely. But truly, it would be pretty painful if you try to do that. So what to do? And then we discovered drugs. Oh, wonderful, these drugs, ganja. You take it and your consciousness expands a little bit or seems to expand a little bit. So people become addicted. Alcohol, heroin, they give the same kind of molecule, dopamine. And then you get addicted. There's another form of addiction. When you become very intellectual, gradually you become addicted to information. You need a lot of information to do your intellectual thinking on your information. You make a world of yourself in which you live, okay? And this information addiction, because of technology, internet, is very contagious. And really, it is a wonderful invention in a way, just as pleasure is wonderful if you use it with some discipline. Internet likewise. But many young people get out of control and develop an information junkie. And then you get dumbed down. You must have heard that phrase, dumbed down, literally. Dumbed down means that you get stuck with that information processing me. And then happiness is definitely compromised. Eventually you become neurotic. So the challenge with level 2 is that unless you do something, you cannot even maintain the normalcy. So what happens, most normal people, they start normal, but eventually they become very unhappy people, neurotic people, because they staying in the normal itself demands that you do something positive. When we had the religious culture, we did something positive routinely. In the West, Christianity, organized religion, they went to church, and every week, people would have some experience of kneeling down and surrendering and prayers, and it's wonderful. In Hinduism, we used to say, well, every month there is a huge celebration of some kind of involving some archetype. The gods are our archetype, the representation of the archetype. So you would have Krishna Puja, we have Durga Puja, we have all this puja, Ganesha Puja, Murugan Puja, wonderful archetypes, and we worship them. We remember the archetypes. We meditated on the archetypes. We took flowers and threw on the archetypes with prayers that, yes, please fulfill. I want to explore you and fulfill my desire. That's what these pujas were about. Now they're just our prejudices that, oh, that's all prejudice, and we just do them for social reasons. With that miscenteredness and that same kind of transactional relationship, so no scope of expansion of consciousness. We have destroyed our culture. In every country, this has happened. Even cultures, for example, in Islam, people still do that namaz 5 times a day. Many people do that. Unfortunately, often they do it quite mechanically, and therefore it does not give you that expansion of consciousness. If it did, you could not be violent. If it did, you have to love. You could not be treating your women badly. Because one of the things that happens in love is that you cannot dominate the other. That domination circuit, the negative emotional brain circuit, would be automatically in check because you know that if you dominate somebody, that somebody cannot love you. Cannot love you. A wife dominated cannot love you. A husband dominated cannot love you. This simple understanding has gone out of our society and culture. This is why in India, so much of abuse of women, abuse of child. Why is this happening? Because we as a culture have failed our people. We as a culture have accepted materialist science in our academy. Throw out those rascals, fire everyone, and get people who will teach us Upanishads, who will teach us about consciousness, who will teach us about love. We have the science, quantum science. We have to do radical things in cultures all over the world. And in India especially, there is no excuse because we have already a tradition in place. Why are we bound by this 40-year-old absolutely vacuous science, mechanistic science, which has no basis after quantum physics has come around? Quantum non-locality is verified thousands of times. Non-locality between brains have been verified. The idea of quantum self, neuroscientists have verified, yes, brain becomes non-local. When we have a creative experience, we have an experience of love, the heart and the brain becomes synchronous. Can you believe it? We have verified these things. It's no longer somebody's theory, even though the theory is based on science, quantum physics. But we have verified our predictions. Why then is it so difficult to talk about these things in India? I am totally shocked, that even in India, people are so reluctant, people in the academy, that is. So, this is a friendly conference. Of course, you are all sympathetic because, of course, Pyramid Valley has done a good job in terms of spreading ideas that are conducive to consciousness. I have been there in physical. I'm very impressed indeed. But we have to do more to bring people out of this normal consciousness and explore higher states of happiness. Level 3 of happiness begins when we work on our negativity. How do we work on negativity? Brain is 5 times more negative than it is positive. You have to tame the brain first. How do you tame the brain? Meditation is part of a process called creativity. We have to apply creativity. Creativity is meditation along with an active exploration. We have to do and be together. This is what Patanjali says. Nobody understands Patanjali in India anymore, but Patanjali's eightfold way consists of two processes that leads to realization, which is called samadhi. The two processes are dharana and dhyana. Both are not the same. Dharana is concentrating, dhyana is relaxing. Very different way of meditating. One is concentration meditation, we meditate on a mantra. The other is we relax, we meditate on the subject, we meditate on being mindful. We watch everything without being attached to it. So one is do, the other one is be. And then if we do it alternatively, I call it do because there is a jingle in the West. Frank Sinatra sang a song, made it very famous. So, but this do is really the right way. And if we do that, then we get the second big quantum effect, quantum leap. It is continuous transition. We get an insight. We get a change in character. So it's not as hard as it seems, as it seemed once, that all the spiritual people, they're meditating all the time, they're not getting anywhere. Well, they're not getting anywhere because they are misunderstood Patanjali. They didn't do both of them in this tandem way, do. They practiced a little bit of do, then they practiced a little bit of be, and such misconceptions. Somebody even wrote that if you do a lot of do, if you become expert in dharana, can hold dharana for 1 hour, then you can do dhyana. No, you don't need to have dharana that long in order to be relaxed. No. You can do TM, people are right. You can do only 20 minutes. In fact, you can do for 15 minutes. I teach my students initially, just do 15 minutes. Just learn to concentrate so that you can think about the problem, so that you can also engage feeling with the problem. And then dhyana is the basis stuff that also has to be done. Just learn to just sit without fidgeting. That's it. So easy. Doing nothing should be very easy. But today's people, they cannot do nothing. They always have to do something. That is the problem. We live in a do world. Change it to do. You have creativity. You can take creative leaps and that will change your character towards positivity. Then the positive and negative are balanced. You have tamed the brain. You have emotional intelligence. That's happiness level 3. How do you get into higher happiness? This is a big challenge, and our culture, our society is hampered because we all want to move into places where it's difficult to do, doing the basics. First develop emotional intelligence, tame the brain, then go for these higher states of happiness. Everybody wants to be enlightened just like that. I'll tell you what enlightened is about. It's about giving up your ego entirely and live with God. Just imagine how far you are from there when you are not even experiencing expanded states of consciousness in a regular basis. You look at a flower, nothing happens. You look at your loved one, nothing happens. You are still into me-centering. Me-centered, me. What is there? Why should I look at a flower? It doesn't give me anything. No, it doesn't. It doesn't. This is the problem. We're always looking for something to benefit the me. Some disciplines are needed in order to find our path back to more consciousness, more positivity, more happiness. In the process, we also have to change the society because society has become such that it is difficult to even meditate because there is no support for meditation. But that is not entirely true either, because the society does value creativity. If you meditate and develop do, the right way to meditate, following Patanjali in its essence, quantum science is completely supporting it. And then you meditate and you become transformed. You tame these negative emotions, you become emotionally intelligent. You will see that you can do everything better. You can handle your health better. And as previous speaker was saying, Why should people get sick? I mean, I love that heading. It is difficult to get sick, really true. And look at this amount of sickness that people have today. People get cancer if they don't love. You know, love is disastrous to the immune system. And that's a heart chakra disease. Love is when immune system is suspended momentarily. That's when heart becomes different. Heart changes function. It can love. Can you remember that? Today, people are suffering from coronavirus. What's the major problem? Problem is the immune system goes awry. People don't love anymore. They are the ones who maximally suffer. The older people who live in a lonely way and don't know how to love. I'm 84 years old, practically within a few days, I'll become 84. And look at me. I don't have that problem. Why should you? I am not an exceptional person. As ordinary as you are, everyone. And everybody can expand their consciousness, and then you will wonder, how does one get sick? Sick is a contracted consciousness, lack of wholeness. Our life, the thinking, living, and livelihood becomes out of joint. No synchrony, no congruence. We have to establish congruence and wholeness. These archetypes, bring them back to life, bring them back in our equation for happiness. Banish the negative by simply taming the brain. All this is now available with quantum science to help you. All this is available by following the treatises that we have inherited. Every Indian, nobody can take away the cultural heritage that you have. Use that seriously. And then if you need verification, if you need authentication, look at quantum physics and its data, quantum science. But you still have to understand that the Shastras was not perfect. They had some little bit of imperfection. For example, this thinking the world as illusion. This is the biggest mistake that people have made in interpreting the Indian metaphysics. Consciousness is the ground of being. It separates itself into subject and object to experience itself. That's the price of experience you pay. And for the experience, you create a situation in which consciousness has to, in a certain sense, create an illusion for itself. Otherwise, it cannot divide itself. It's impossible for oneness to divide and call that reality. So it has to be a kind of a illusory construction. But the illusion, notice it's not illusion. Why? Have you ever seen an illusion which stays on and on and on? No, this illusion stays with us. This is an illusion that repeats and repeats and repeats every time we experience, even the realized person. Any experience always comes with this separation. The illusion persists. Only in the unconscious the illusion goes away. And these unfortunately escaped these interpreters, and they introduced this world is illusion concept and destroyed the Hindu culture. After that, Hinduism has never been a strong, forceful culture. So that got to go. Don't go in that direction. Don't even touch the word illusion. It's not illusion. Illusion cannot have this stability. Anything that comes back again and again, anything that occurs every time we experience is a necessity of science. Scientific necessity for consciousness to be manifest, to have experience, to give rise to this world. And then you have to make the world better. That's the idea. Make the world happier. That's the idea. We have to climb the ladder of consciousness, happiness, expansion of consciousness. Be enthused, just as Yama, the great god of death, told Nachiketa, this little boy who wanted to know reality. All the wounds are here. Quantum science has given us complete assurance. You do meditation, you follow Patanjali, be creative, be congruent. You can accomplish anything. Your intentions come true. The archetypes come back in your life. You can live in expanded consciousness. You can conquer the brain. You can conquer disease. And you can be happy. Wake up in that reality. Thank you.
Very, very excellent discourse, very absorbing, very deep, beyond any conception, Professor Goswami. I catch few words from your discourse. Is expand your heart, feel the joy, be creative, and just follow the process of meditation. All these have been the part of our culture. And what historically I perceive is the major solutions in the society by the uh, religious masters or senior masters have been given in the society. They become the part of culture. Hugging, I still feel when I used to go and meet my grandma when I used to be a child, the kind of joy, kind of love that emits from her words. She wants you to hug. She would place her hands over your head. She will hug you, and the kind of feeling that when we became intellectual and grew in education, we started ignoring all that. And what you explained is wonderful. And Professor Goswami, we must appreciate, and we really feel that a work like yours will bring this culture back, and culture, we will realize this, and we'll have uh, a life which is a true life. This workshop has been planned in a way that the appreciation for nature is one foundation. You also narrated, makes us like open up our hearts, feel that joy, become natural. So we started from there. You heard the spiritual laws of health. The person spoke so well about emotionally attaching to our lives and our food and our everything, and relating it to that kind of a joy, creativity. And your discourse has added a, a different dimensions to we logical thinkers. We are left brainers to understand this, the whole science of right brain. Maybe I would, if I put those words. So thank you so much for agreeing to join us and give us such a wonderful discourse. We will actually look forward to staying connected with you. I still remember that song. It becomes a part of life, and it's a good reminder to use doobie 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 doo. So I remember that about a couple of years ago we attended your 3-day program, and since then it's a good reminder for us. Often on occasion we miss that out, and that's a good memory, good remembrance. Thank you so much, Dr. Goswami.
Thank you.
So nice of you. If people allow, we can move on to the next one, or if anyone wants to say, it's a great discourse, anyone wants to ask, we can take one or two people if Professor Goswami allows them. Hello, Professor Goswami?
Yes.
Yeah, if someone wants to raise any questions, we can take one or two, otherwise. So anyone wants to say anything, ask anything, raise any questions? Okay, so there are indications then that we can go ahead.
Okay.
I myself had a very very small question, actually, if you allow me, is uh, in the historical literature, we have heard this, and you said something about this, that the whole satya jagat uh, मतलब ब्रह्म सत्य और जगत मिथ्या. So that kind of a, that has impacted us quite a lot. So how do you comment on that?
Well, I am, of course, this is, I talked about it already in the lecture, but I will reiterate my position. It is a gross misunderstanding. It was necessary in a way. Shankara was a great man, greatest, perhaps, in intellect, but his heart was not very developed. The problem was that from his point of view, he could not make sense of the fact that uh, indeed consciousness cannot create this division, separateness without an illusion. That part is correct. We have a quantum physical reconstruction of it, and the brain does cause that illusion because it has a trap for consciousness to trap itself in. But the point he missed, and this is what happens in every science, in my own experience. I miss such, big, great discovery and then miss a simple thing. Our consciousness is like that. It cannot see everything clearly. So Newton gave us the right view. You have to stand on shoulders of giant. Unfortunately, Shankara didn't. Shankara is so arrogant in his ability of intellect, and in his time, he defeated everyone, right? So he did not believe Krishna, he did not believe Patanjali, he rewrote everything. He has his own interpretation of Bhagavad Gita. He reinterpreted and excluded the idea that, okay, one cannot live with that. That's fine as a esoteric concept, the idea of that everything is just that, and that's the thing that we need to do, explore that oneness. Krishna rejects that, no? Krishna says, no, you have to fight the battlefield of the world. That is why you have given a human birth. Shankara rewrites it, said, no, human birth, the only thing is you have human birth and then you live it. You go live there in oneness. What kind of logic is that? So we got trapped with that. Brahma Satya Jagat Mithya. There is another interpretation. Swami Dayananda, who is a great Swami, I knew him quite well personally, and we had some great conversations. He once told me that, this word mithya, his impression is that mithya means epiphenomenon. It really does not even mean a lie, does not even mean an illusion. So his feeling is that, look, Shankara was very intelligent, and according to legend, he did leave his body and had a life of sex for 1 year with a woman. So maybe he also had heart awakening at some point of his life. And so his feeling was that maybe Shankara is talking about mithya with the other meaning, not a lie, but epiphenomenon. And yes, this is true. The world is the epiphenomenon of consciousness. The world is created from consciousness as a secondary phenomenon. Consciousness is the ground of being, no question about it. Quantum physics verifies it, that non-local, everything comes from that non-local potentiality, okay? So this interpretation, if you take, then you can also continue to be very respectful to, if you read Shankara's personal life, how can we not be respectful? This is the greatest thinker that ever lived. So, and this is another interpretation, and that's a good thing. He says that lie means tuchya. Tuchya is the trivial. Shankara never said that the world is trivial. Otherwise, his test that why would he establish 32 centers that still stands? India still is based on Shankara spirituality. And look at Shankar Maths, they really still work. I mean, they're good places to be if you want to find out about reality, right? So Shankara did something good, and we can also interpret Shankara in a pretty positive way, and perhaps that's a good idea. Okay?
Okay. Thank you so much, Professor Amit Goswami. It's so nice. So it's enlightening, actually. Thank you once again.